on to the days, please. We'll start plenary 1 of day 2. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives us great pleasure to welcome Aruna Roy and Dr. C. Rammanohar Reddy to the first plenary of day 2. Very quickly to introduce our moderator, our interlocutor for this session, Dr. C. Rammanohar Reddy. He is the founder, editor of the India Forum. He was earlier editor of Economic and Political Weekly, Mumbai. He has been in the media since 1988, first with Deccan Herald and then The Hindu. He has co-edited with M.V. Ramana, Prisoners of the Nuclear Dream, 2004, and authored Demonetization and Black Money in 2017. Thank you very much, Dr. Rammanohar Reddy, and Dr. Rammanohar Reddy will introduce Aruna Roy and then conduct the conversation. And as always, this is a 50-minute session, and after 40 minutes, it will be opened up for the audience questions. Request the audience to keep their questions, not comments, suggestions, and anything else, but keep it to questions and keep them short so that we can take as many questions as possible. Thank you very much, and over to Dr. Rammanohar Reddy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vijay. Good morning, everybody, for the beginning of the second day of the Hyderabad Literary Festival. We are, of course, honored to have the day begin with a conversation with Aruna Roy. There is this trite observation in all such sessions saying that she needs no introduction. But yes, she does need no introduction, but I think I would like to say that Aruna, for many of us, has been our conscience for many decades of the things that we should do, the things that we shouldn't do, and what we should be working towards. She has, of course, been working for more than 50 years, beginning in rural Rajasthan. Before that, she was in the Indian University. Sangathan, and she has been involved. I say involved because many of them have been collective enterprises with the right to information campaign, with the campaign for the employment program, the rural employment program. Yeah, she has been involved in innumerable campaigns working with the marginalized, and she's also, shall I say, a public intellectual, if you can use that term. She writes often in the papers and magazines. Now we are here today to discuss this book, The Personal is Political, which is titled as her memoirs. I'd just like to spend 1 or 2 minutes about the book to give you an idea for those of you who have not read it. It's titled The Memoirs, but it's not your typical memoirs in the sense that, went to school here, went to college here, I met this person, I worked there. All that is there. But more than that, reflecting her own politics, it is an account of collective enterprises of various kinds over 40, 50 years. It is also a reflection, if I can say that, a reflection on our society, reflection of our times where we are now, and which is interspersed with stories of individuals. There is as much about the people that she has worked with than about herself. To begin with, of course, let me say it again, it's an honor that you are with us today. Can we start with the title of the memoirs, if I can use the term memoirs, that the personal is political. Yes, this is a slogan, or rather a rallying cry of the feminist movement of the 60s, 70s. But many of us in India, among the middle class especially, feel that the personal must be separate from the political. We don't see the connection. But you highlight the fact that the personal is the political, and you also speak a lot about personal ethics influencing and being very important for social ethics, that you can't keep the two separate. Could you talk about that a bit, both about the title and the personal ethics and social ethics?
Thank you very much, Ram, for introducing me, and thanks to all of you for being here on a Saturday morning. I know how difficult it is to get out of home. I think the fact that the personal is political is clear to most women, I think, from the day we are born. Everything we do at home or outside is under public scrutiny, and our lives are decided by people other than ourselves. So we know that our lives are political. We may not understand it and we may not put it in these words, but every single choice we make is a choice that is politically defined, and after all we are fighting for equality. And equality is a public democratic political issue. Also it is a personal and private issue. So therefore, the personal is political was a slogan of the 60s. I don't know how many of you were young enough in the 60s to feel excited by the personal is political, but many of us were very excited. This slogan has no ownership. It has been compiled by a group of women. And in today's India, whom I marry is decided by the state. It tells me that I can't marry the person of my choice. First of all, traditional society doesn't let me choose the person I want to marry. There I have a problem. And then the state has passed laws to tell me I can't marry this one and that one. Instead of being a state which guarantees us more access to equality, it has restricted our equality, and you only have to see the state of Uttar Pradesh and many other states to see what is being done to young women there. So how can we say personal is not political? Personal is political, but I would like to make one statement, Ram, that there is the private, and the private is private. And I think in this book I had a hell of a problem keeping the private private. I don't want to discuss many things, and I will never do it. It's my business. But every time I indulge in any opinion or in any kind of public action, I am liable to scrutiny, and I am liable to be, and I have an obligation to be both transparent and therefore political.
Could you talk a bit about what in the second half of the book you spend on private ethics and social ethics? That you give the classic example of, as Indians, we keep our homes very clean, but we are happy to throw the garbage on the roads. But that's a simple observation. But you talk also about the politics. That if you're practicing politics, then that should reflect your private ethical behavior.
I think it's a dilemma. Many of my activist friends are there in the audience and will all share that whether in the civil service or whether in an NGO, whether just an ordinary citizen, every kind of action that you take, since I believe everything is political, whether you take, even if you help somebody or don't help somebody, it's a political decision. So I think in that case, since I don't see the division between my home and the outside, I feel if it's unclean outside, it's going to pervade my inside. And I don't think we need a better example of today than in today's democracy, that what happens inside my home I'm being forced to be unethical by a state today. So therefore, how can we differentiate? But I do think that we have this peculiar, that's why I juxtapose two kinds of ethics. One is the traditional ethics, which tells us we should be hierarchical, which tells us I'm bound in caste, which quotes Manusmriti to tell me that I'm a woman and I belong to a lower category of beings, which even if you reject in your daily life, there's somehow part of your conditioning. You think and it manifests itself in absurd ways, like the man sits down, if both of them work, and the woman goes to get a cup of tea. I mean, if from their beginning there. But the films that how can we expect an ethical society if at home we demand truth? At home, the head of the family demands honesty, and you go out and the child knows very soon that the parent is taking bribes the parent is succumbing to all kinds of pressure to do illegal things, how can you expect the child to have any notion of ethics? So the private, the personal and the political, all three join actually in this. So the debate in India becomes a very falsified debate. I'm quite amazed that the right to information brought so many hundreds of thousands of people onto the public platform. People who don't have a name and are not mentioned in any place. But people who got excited because this was the first time they could talk about the contradictions and the power of information and the power of transparency to blow out and blow up all these hypocrisies that exist in our society.
Can we now, I mean, it's hard to discuss all the movements you've been involved in, but perhaps if we can focus a bit on the MKSS, the movement which began in the early or mid-90s, if I'm not mistaken. And especially the importance you lay in your book on how it began. And I quote that sentence: the political life of the MKSS is tethered to the mud hut so that we never lost sight of reality. That the four of you lived in this hut with just four walls and nothing else. And from that, you worked with people in the area and the larger state to build up this movement, which of course led to the RTI campaign, etc. Could you?
I think, in India, we have a tradition of asceticism. And in my day, we were all known as people who had sacrificed for the country. Today, I'm called an urban Nakshal. So there's been a whole change of public perception. But at the time when I decided to go and live in rural India, everyone was appalled at the sacrifice. They also said, you've sacrificed to go and live there. But for me, power doesn't lie in New Delhi. Power doesn't lie in the corridors of Parliament or the new Parliament, the older Parliament, or the two north and south blocks that are there in Lutyens, Delhi. Power really lies in the individual's capacity to work democracy and the individual capacities to understand how to work the democracy. And in our country, there are many Indias. And if you go to a rural scenario, even at the worst of times when we're talking about divisions between one community and another, if you sit in that village, you definitely face Dalit atrocities of an enormous nature. You understand that drinking water, fetching water is a problem. I mean, when we lived in that mud hut, we still continue to live in that mud hut. Everyone thinks it's a bit of romance which got glamour to it now. But the point is that the mud hut is very beautiful. It's aesthetically very beautiful. Secondly, in that mud hut, we are exposed physically and otherwise to society and to other issues that happen. If you've ever lived in a village, especially in the older villages, because now they are getting modernized, there is no concept of privacy. Your walls are low, your doors have to be open in the morning. If you close your doors, there's suspicion that there's something going on inside. So your doors are open, people walk in, and in that atmosphere, you also have to be clear that whatever you do inside can be seen by an outsider, not only in terms of the ethics of what you do, but even in terms of the physicality of yourself. So it's a concept that brings in a whole different idea of politics of democracy. And it was critically important to me, and I didn't see it as a sacrifice. I personally enjoyed it. I enjoyed the fact that we had to get water from the well, and I wasn't very young when I went to Devduri. I'm still older now, but I'm much older now. But when I went there, it was a question of how do you fetch the water from the well. Unless you are a woman who are fetching the water from the well on your head, you don't understand what it takes. You just dismiss it. It's a book. If it's a figure in a book or a story in a book that you read, it's something else. But once you feel it on your skin, it's different. And I felt that if I had to be part of this movement of women and workers, I should be a worker. I even worked on a work site for 15 days and I worked very badly. They in fact told me to go off because I didn't know how to dig, I didn't know how to shovel, I didn't know how to lift. and they told me I was a dead loss. And then from there emerged a verified and authenticated battle that minimum wage workers and whom we call unskilled workers are really very skilled. It's just that the demand is less than the supply. So we've damned them as unskilled laborers. And it goes into so many categories of oppression. The wage you pay them, the kind of work you give them, and so on. So it was very important for me to stay there, and it's still a very important space.
Again, linked to the Amica, now, I said in the beginning that the book is more a reflection on the moments you've been involved in. But you do talk about a number of people. I mean, let's say you talk about the collective nature of these moments, you talk about a number of individuals. And there's one person who figures right through the book, I think from the beginning. That's Naurti, the Dalit woman who you worked with. Could you share with us some of the experiences that, the initial hesitation, her hesitation to work with you, and how you saw each other, and how you built this bond that must have lasted many decades?
Actually, Naurti is not only my teacher, because she taught me workers' politics, she taught me how to operate in the village. She also taught me Dalit politics in its basics, in its intricacies, in the ways it functions, because there's not one group called Dalit. Amongst the Dalit, you have various categories of castes, and the intra-caste issues. She also made me realize that very simple things we take for granted are denied people. So she's been a fantastic guru, but we've walked the path together. The first path we walked was the minimum wage battle. She organized 500 people in 1981 to protest against minimum wages, which became a Supreme Court case. Meanwhile, we got to know each other better. She disabused me of my notion that literacy was just a small skill to acquire for older women. She realized the need for literacy, but she insisted that they should be given time. So she said, you must give us time. You go to university, she called it in her local language in Rajasthani, she said, you go to study for 15 years and you don't give us any time to study. Then you push us into these classrooms at night after we are dead tired. We have worked the whole day, and you give us these chalks in our hand, and we are worse than our children. We can't even make those squiggles. How can we do that? So forced me to realize that the way we treat people in the development perspective is full of inequality. So we turned over the program and we made half the day literacy and half the day education. The education is very different from literacy. I don't know how many of you will agree with me, but literacy is not education, it's just a skill. Education is so much more. So Naurti and her friends, there were many people who came to the literacy class, used to educate us about politics, about feminist politics, about Dalit politics, about their village politics, about the kinds of corruption that are inflicted on them. So it gave us a feeling of equality. Even today, Naurti is more ill than I am. She's 2 years younger, but she's ill and sick. But still, even today, at any protest, you can see the two of us together as friends. We've remained friends, we visit each other, and she has also disabused me of very, very foolish notions that I have. When we had a big discussion on inter-caste marriage, she said to me, buzz off, no question of my having inter-caste marriage for my children. You have a lot of securities. Where are my securities? People will come with lathis, they'll kill me and kill my daughter, kill my son-in-law, kill the child. I'm not ready for it yet. Though conceptually I agree with you, you'll have to give us time. So these are all things which pull me down, and not this great fun. We've sung together, we've danced together, and she is in everything I do, including this book. I think so many of the thoughts that I express there could be partly hers.
I just want to add that the book is so rich in this, this and such respects. The relationship with not just the personal relationship, but the political and the granular understanding of caste as it operates, To turn to a different thing, as I said, I just have to pick and choose of so many things in the book. Talking about turning to politics today, the general sense, You talk about the communalization of politics today, and you make a very revelatory, not revelatory, insightful statement that this is in part because of the liberal elite of India, and I quote, cut themselves off from any public discourse on religion. That this is what happened in 50s, 60s, 70s. And thereby left the space open for a narrow-minded interpretation of religion. And that is why we are in a situation today. How do we now enter this discourse to modify our relationship with religion?
Even for this, I'd like to go back to Northi, because Northi has never not been with me on any progressive issue. She has stood with me on all inequality issues, but she is religious. So when I say to her, why do you have this Rudraksha around your neck? She said, what's the harm? And why shouldn't I have the Rudraksha around my neck? So we have entered into these religious debates with so many of my worker friends. So we have to differentiate, and we have to differentiate between faith in religion or various kinds of religion, and 98% of India is religious, one way or the other, and something we have to accept. Communalism, which makes my religion the superior religion and the religion of authority, which can exterminate, distort or finish off other religions through state power. And the third one is secularism, and what the Constitution has given us. And I think somewhere in our public debate, we have not been able to separate this. Kash is sitting here, and he's been part of this extremely good debate, and he's tried to say it in so many ways, but it has not become as popular as it should be. But how important it is to understand the Constitution, its guaranteed secularism, and natural belief of faith. And I think a friend of mine calls it cultural Hinduism. She said we have to talk about cultural Hinduism. How do I get married? What happens when I die? Or what happens when there's a festival? I remain in the tradition that I'm born. I mean, it's not that I don't want to be a Christian or a Muslim, or I don't want to be a Sikh, or I don't want to be a Buddhist or a Jew. But the point is, the only tradition I know is the tradition I've been born in. So we're all cultural Hindus in many ways, she says. But we have not debated it publicly enough to understand that that is the richness of the Indian tradition. This cultural pluralism, and the fact that religion can be expressed in so many ways, and the tolerance of another's belief. We talk so much about dissent, we talk so much about tolerance, we talk so much about difference, but on this one issue, we just flare up, and there's this huge angst that comes out. And I was a year and a half when Gandhiji was assassinated. And I was in Delhi, and I remember the agony of every household in Delhi at that time, and how no house prepared or cooked food for many days, as in the Indian tradition, when there's death, no food is cooked. But he left us a legacy which we have not taken up, and that is talking publicly about all religions, talking about faith and talking about secularism, and that's why he was shot. He was shot because he could occupy that space where religion could be publicly discussed along with other issues. I think somewhere we have to examine ourselves. This book, Ram, if I might just take a minute, is the space where I thought one could express these things. As an activist, when I'm demanding rights, I just can't say, oh, hold on a minute, let's have a discussion. It's not possible. So this has been an indulgence in many ways, where all these ideas which come to one's mind and fed with other people's ideas, collectivism has not found a space. And I really think if India has to be retrieved into being a secular country with space for everybody, we can't all become Trumps. Certainly we can't become Trumps saying that you can't be here, you can't be there, and you should be extradited and you should be sent off. There are many Trumps, of course, in the world.
Thank you for elaborating on this. I just want to correct you. It's not an indulgence. You know, what you've reflected on in the book, the many aspects of culture, society, politics. It's something, I mean, I use a strong word, revelatory, and it's also something for us to think about and discuss beyond the book. Now, remaining with politics in the broadest sense of the term, I'd like to touch on two of the many interesting observations you make there, unconnected, but still. One, you have a discussion on the relative role, or rather, of men and women, how they see politics. You have this very interesting, I mean, I had never thought about it that way. So you say men look at politics as agenda driven, while the women, when they're involved, they look at it as process driven. And being process driven adds to the strength of the deliberations in democracy. And in fact, the second, it was unrelated, but let me just put it down. You spend a lot of time talking about the importance of culture in political activity in the broadest sense, of how music, drama, theatre, all that played an important role in making politics richer in your campaigns. Could you talk about both? I mean, these are two unrelated aspects.
I'll try and be as concise as I can. The first one was about women and men. I don't know, do you really think, my friends who are all women, that when you are IAS officers, when you're professors, when you're teachers, that you are slightly different from the men? Yes? Do you? Let me see hands go up. Do you see yourself different? So that's it. Though we work professionally together, there is a difference. And of course, some men are feminists and some women are totally patriarchal. I'm not ruling that out. Nevertheless, it's always involving others, discussing others, sharing information. In communities, men don't think of it. Men want to reach the goal as quickly as possible. And women say, wait, we are not carrying everyone with us. We should have a discussion. We should have them along. And in my life, it has been critical, these discussions. Because always, the goal is there. You think if you run today, you'll catch it. But you just have to say, look, you're not taking everyone with you. You just have to wait. And if there are changes to be made, changes have to be made. And they may not come within your idea of radical, immediate, progressive behavior. But that's what will bring the community together. What is more important? So I think MKSS has really been very feminine in its work pattern, not only because I was there, and I'm a very argumentative person. I think probably bring alive the fact of Amartya's book called The Argumentative Indian. I think I was taught to argue by my father, and I've argued ever since. But it's not that alone. It's the fact that when you argue with a woman, you become a person of contempt, something to be mocked about, something to be made a joke about, something to be laughed at. And so you have to really first swallow that kind of angst about the aggression and then go ahead. But process is another since I don't have time, it's a very, very important thing. Actually, this deserves a whole hour to itself, but I'll just say one thing. We talk about means and ends. So if you don't look at the means, however good the end, you can never really reach a kind of ethical correctness. Since all my battles have been about ethics, whether it's Manrega, whether it's RTI, whether it's labor laws, whether it's right to land, to food, to shelter, anything, it's an ethical issue. So how can your means deny the ends? And violence is one of them. And how can you have a violent means of reaching a non-violent end? It's not possible. So MKSS has chosen to be non-violent, use passive resistance, rather than go into violent modes, because you can't have that. The second thing you asked me was about culture. I think it's a misnomer. My class, into which I was born, fragments everything. Everything is in a category. And women have protested against these categories. They wanted to break down these categories, break down this, what we call internal divisions. When I went to a village, dance and politics, music and politics, culture and politics all merged. And I found that that is the way a culture expresses itself. So you can see something culturally expressed. And of course, the extraordinary power of song and theatre to convey your message has been phenomenal with MKSS. We still continue to work with it. And as I talk to you, there's a big group of people walking in the villages with huge puppets, larger than life puppets, to make sure that everybody comes, and then you start talking to them and so on. So we've done all this, and I think it's not possible to do a political campaign without understanding culture. Politics is culture. Look at our politics. It's become such a degraded culture today, the way in which we operate within the very narrow confines of politics, that unless we break those walls and go out into the larger cultural scenario, we can never change that politics.
I think we have time for just a couple of more questions among us. One is, you're right that the poverty should strike, especially referring to urban poverty, that it should shock every Indian, and yet it does not. And you also write about dealing with the complicity of silence that many of us, most of us, partake in. And you say that cynicism can't be the ground for inaction. Now, for many of us over here who are sensitive and are yet unable to or unwilling to live a life of struggle for a better society, what are our options today, especially when if you protest, you are deemed anti-national, if you express freedom of expression, that is considered against the law. I'm not asking you for guidance, but reflect on this. What do you think people who, well, the middle class, urban elite, who are yet sensitive, how do they deal with today's India?
I think urban poverty is much more disturbing than rural poverty. But when you see the child at the traffic lights in Delhi begging, or when you see somebody without proper clothes in winter, or when you see them in a slum struggling to get potable drinking water, people of me, like all of us, are born in privilege. We don't understand how privileged we are. Till we see those who are not privileged, we just think all the time that we have to get more. We have to get more equality and more privilege. But when we look at that, then there's a sense of great guilt and a sense of great sorrow, which comes to me, and I'm sure I'm not a very extraordinary human being, I'm a very ordinary person, and I think most people feel like that. The point really is that you have to do something about it. And most of us now have been conditioned to believe that we should not do anything because of so many reasons. There are n number of reasons. But the thing is, we must act. The problem with the scenario that we face in urban India, especially since you're all in Hyderabad, is that we don't act. And I think lots of different kinds of action is possible. It is not necessary that you must become a revolutionary, that you have to upturn everything, but something can be done by everyone. And tell me how many of you, when you face this kind of situation, don't feel moved enough somewhere in your head, or something tells you in your head that you should act. Again, I want to answer. How many of you feel that you must do something when somebody is being beaten, a Dalit is being beaten, somebody is being harassed by the police? I mean, don't you feel there should be something to set the track to give them justice? Do I mean to say that none of you feel like that? Oh, so quite a few of you feel that there should be justice. That feeling is a common feeling. The only thing that is uncommon is that we don't plan to act. And there are small, big and major things that can be given. And I think from distributing blankets to people who are cold on the streets, sleeping on the streets, in any city, to making sure that they can access food through the ration card, or to access to space to go somewhere. I mean, there's so many different ways. And each one of us can take our pick. But I think some kind of action is necessary. Only those who want to plead inaction become cynics, I feel. The moment you become a cynic, "Arey, kuch nahi ho sakta hai, nothing will ever happen," is a very good way of saying, I will not do anything. To reduce my privilege. And I don't think in India we should be like that. I think small things, big things, and that's why I'm not differentiating between charity, between development, between struggle, between radical behavior, between writing in the papers, attracting somebody. I think as a society we must speak. We must speak out right. We must do something. We must make this consciousness general.
Volunteers have told us our time is up, but we started 5 minutes late, so I'm going to take 2 minutes. Just the last point. Today, we are meeting on the eve of Republic Day, and constitutional morality, if I can tell all of us who are here, discussion of constitutional morality forms an important part of this book. Could you reflect on constitutional morality today? I mean, recent times there has been a greater discussion on the streets, in political activity, about protecting the constitution. But at the same time, we have been seeing a lot of violation of the constitution.
Actually, since I'm old enough to have known many Indias, the initial India I knew used to be very critical of the constitution. There were many people who said it was not radical enough, it was a middle of the central constitution. The left had criticism of it, the right hated it because it was a secular constitution, it did become a theocracy. But they were in the middle of the stream, which also talked about the constitution. So for me, awareness of the constitution began very early, but its relevance began in 1991 with the breaking of the masjid. I then realized when Babri Masjid was broken, that day I realized how critically important this constitution is to all of us. And when I go and still, when I went into all kinds of literate communities, including top-rate scientists, and said, have you looked at the constitution? They hadn't even seen the constitution. And then you talk about India as a citizen, as a voter. How can you talk responsibly about being a part of the democratic country of India without knowing the constitution? So constitutional education has become critically important. I know my rights, but I don't know how it derives from the constitution. So somebody comes and says, change the constitution. I said, right, let's burn the constitution, but I want my right. But my right is linked to that constitution. The simplest of my rights, even the right to vote, is linked to the constitution. And I think that education has to become a general education. And our educational institutions have failed, our social movements have failed, our political movements have failed very, very much so. So I think the constitution has now become the one symbol of retaining rights, the one symbol of equality and liberty and fraternity, the one symbol of the right to speak, which is being denied to us now a great deal everywhere, the right to so many things, the right to live. So many of us are being exterminated in this country, just like that, just gunned down, and we don't know why they're being gunned down. So unless we stick to this constitution and the plurality, because Radhakrishnan said when the constitution was being made, that if we don't accept that there is a lot of prejudice and lot of traditional miasma in this country, my words, that you will never be able to get India forward. So we have to accept. Therefore, the constitution is a vital constitution, it's an important constitution, and the famous slogan that now all of us activists have been shouting, no constitution, no India. That we know. संविधान नहीं तो देश नहीं, संविधान नहीं तो आज़ादी नहीं, संविधान नहीं तो आवाज nahi. So in whatever way you say it, it's very, very important to me as a woman. It's a very, very important document.
Thank you. We now have 10 minutes for questions. Aruna, if it's okay with you, we could give preference to any young hands which raise. Please be brief. We have just time for 2-3 questions. So make it question, not a comment. The young person next to your right, right? Just to your, yeah, she has a hand up.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much. That the whole talk was just very illuminating. I wanted to ask in context of one of your questions where you said, it's very difficult for people to feel something but translate that into action. I just wanted to know because I wanted to know how valuable you think literature is in getting somebody to not only feel something but to also make them act on something in both the spheres, especially most of us here belong to say the middle class or upper middle class or something, but also in the circles that you fought so long for. I wanted to know what you thought about the role of literature in actually getting people to not only feel it but also start doing something about it.
I'll just quickly tell you that when I first went to rural Rajasthan and I saw the local leaders, I was shocked because I thought I could not even see them, let alone talk to them. But I had to converse with them, I had to convince them, and I had a fear in my belly of interaction with these people. Jane Austen came and helped me there. I was a student of literature, by the way. So, and I keep reading, and of course Jane Austen is a great love of my life. She came to me through Mrs. Bennet and Collins. And I said to myself, just look at this man as a caricature. And don't take him seriously. Why are you giving him so much importance? So I went and I could absolutely sit with the man and talk to him, distancing myself as I would have from a Collins or a Mrs. Bennet.
So on behalf of the entire audience, I want to say that listening to both of you is learning for all of us. What drives democracy is truth. Over 78 years we have been living with democracy. All through these years, have we been living with truth or untruth? Thank you, ma'am.
This is a hugely philosophical question, but there's also a practical side to it. Democracy doesn't promise you heaven and doesn't promise you an easy path. You have to struggle. If we have lived in untruth, we have to blame ourselves. If we have done truth, we have to congratulate ourselves. Because as a democratic voter and a citizen, you create the government that rules you. And if you do not protest, and if you do not, however you do it, collectively, individually, through the law, through street fights, through writing, we are also to blame. So I think when I sit back, my generation has a lot to think and rethink about what we did and didn't do for building India. But you too, all you young people are too quiet in my opinion. You have not raised your voice one way or the other to say you don't like what's happening. You don't have to criticize anybody, but you can just say you don't like the way India is running. Even that is a statement.
Good morning, ma'am. I have a very burning question. So you spoke about the process and especially being non-violent, right? And you also said that you were very argumentative in nature as a personality. And I was also like, a rebellious child, especially at home. I completely agree with the personal is political, right? So my question is, especially from my experience of being struggling and challenging, how do you ensure, or what are your struggles in ensuring to maintain the process of being compassionate and non-violent, especially being a woman and being activist and voicing out at home or otherwise?
I'm very grateful to you for having raised this, because I think one of the things we lack in Indian politics and in Indian democracy is compassion. And I really feel, I can't go on, but I really feel that feminist politics should lead India in the world. Because we ask for change, but we ask for it with love and peace. The feminist politics now only talks about sexuality, largely, but it is forgotten that we are also the people who must ask for settlement of disputes through peace, whether it is Gaza or whether it's Manipur. We must ask for solutions through peace. We should ask for compassion and love. Therefore, compassion and love politically translates into conversations, into truth committees, into all of the various ways in which you can deal with people who have not behaved ethically and morally. Don't have to send them to prison. Fight against the death penalty, for instance. When some of us fought against the death penalty, there was a whole campaign against us, saying that we were anti-national. Now, so women all of us must raise our voices, saying we want justice, we don't want revenge. We want punishment, but we don't want death. I mean, look at the ridiculous statements people make without the death penalty. And after death has been prescribed as the end of rape, how many rapes have happened in this country? Huge numbers of rapes. So it's not a deterrent even. So we have to bring this into larger politics, into smaller politics, and at my village level I have to talk about compassion, about how you cannot differentiate between a Savarna and a Dalit. You can't differentiate between an OBC and a Dalit. They need water, they need food. And if you behave like this as a woman, then you deny your womanhood.
I think we have time for only one question. I'm sorry, There's a person with a mic over there. Yeah, please.
Alright, so you mentioned about collectivism and individualism. And so my question is, how do you feel about our society going from a more collectivist society to a more individualist society? And how do you think it's impacting politics today?
I think public life is collective. Ambitions for change are collective. Democracy is a collective dream. It can never be an individual dream. Nevertheless, there is space for me as an individual to differ. There's space for me as an individual to not like or like. And this is a delicate balance which we all work out in our lives, but it must be politically worked out. And in that political working out, we have pushed, if you call the individual dreams of a collective which doesn't even know what is individual dreams, into the politics of hate and violence, which has happened today. I think we have a lot to ask the ones who believe in individualism and the market, which is set you and me as individual buyers, and it's destroying the collective dream. I really don't have time, so I'm talking in cliches, but we have to look at that as well.
I have time for 2 more questions. Yeah, please.
Thank you both very much. My question was about, as we know, secularism was added later to the Constitution, and I'm curious to hear your take on whether secularism is the best word or another word like pluralism that we were using before might better capture the kind of Indian spirit.
I think this is a topic worth a large number of, a great time spent on it in debate. But I don't have any quarrel with secularism. Why should we quarrel with secularism? The problem is that it has been interpreted to mean atheism in India. Where I work, almost everybody thinks to be secular means that you have to be atheist. So I have to go with the constitution and say the preamble gives you a secular constitution, maybe added later, but it only got the spirit of the constitution into the preamble. And then I read all the various articles which give you right to freedom of worship, right to create educational institutions which are religious. There's so many other rights. So the secular word secular is just to emphasize the fact that the state has an obligation to no single religion, that it has only an obligation to the constitution and the laws of the land.
Yeah.
But we can take this much further.
Just because.
Sorry, we
All right.
can't have the follow. One last question. Yeah, over here. Yeah.
Good morning, ma'am. It's been an insightful conversation. I wanted to ask, so you said that as women the person is political from the day we are born. And also you said how women have they work together and the progress is important to them rather than the end. So sometimes we are called very idealistic as women when we say that we have to stay with together and to make sure that everybody progresses together. And then we're very ridiculed and criticized on that why can't we just focus on that and why do you take everybody, you can't take everybody. So what are your thoughts on that?
Collectivism doesn't mean everybody. Collectivism just means a large group of people who are united by ideology and a commitment to action. You can never ever take everybody in. I would be appalled. I wouldn't want many of the people in my congregation. If you define everybody as everybody, it's not everybody. It's a large number of people, and therefore, in a democracy, because democracy is politics of numbers. So you really have to have numbers. You can't be an individual voice. For when you ask for action, I don't want to go into the campaigns now, but whether it's the right to food campaign, the right to information campaign, the right to work campaign, or many of the other rights, it could have never happened with one individual voice. VP Singh, as Prime Minister, wanted the right to information law. He couldn't do anything about it. And poor peasants in central Rajasthan, with a large number of people together, changed the law, changed a bad law and got a good law in. So you see, you need numbers. Nothing is absolute. It's not that you have to have large numbers of people to take permission before you go have a bath or eat, not at all. I mean, there are all individual functions. The choice of my husband is my right. It's not a collective right. But it's a dialectic. And we have to understand that public action and the larger politics of this country depends on collectivism. My choice of my husband or what I do or wear is my choice. As a feminist, I would never give that up. It is my choice. How I do my hair, whether I dye it or don't dye it, or what I do with my face or don't do with my face, is absolutely my choice.
Thank you very much, Aruna. I'm sure all of us here will agree that you've shared a lot of your experiences. Just a fraction of what are here in the book. If you'll allow me to plug the book. Just before the meeting, Aruna said she wasn't keen on calling it the Memoirs. Actually, it is more than the Memoirs. So it speaks to us, it speaks to our challenges, speaks to our questions, speaks to the many doubts that we've had. So thank you for writing this, and I hope I'm sure a lot of people have read it, and I'm sure a lot more will read and act on it. Yeah.
Can I just say one thing? If you buy it and if you read it, I'd like to know what you think, firstly. And secondly, it's the language. When we are ostracized by men, it's not our thought. They never look at what we're thinking. It's the way we express ourselves and the way we talk. From Virginia Woolf downwards, we've been arguing for a feminist way of expression in language. And this book has battled with it. I don't think it has succeeded. It has given into the patriarchal language from time to time. But at least at some points, a feminist language is also one I think we must all recognize and contend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rammanohar Reddy and Aruna Roy. I just want to take your permission to announce that the book is available at the bookshop, and you will be. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Aruna Roy's book is available at the bookshop, and the festival bookshop is behind you on your left, and Aruna ji has agreed to sign the copies. The book is available. Go grab a copy, and Aruna Roy will be there to sign the copies. Thank you very much, and we are ready for the next session.